Here's a short video that will show you how you can create thread joints for your woodwinds using a unique method of wrapping the tenon socket with beeswax and Vaseline impregnated thread. Joints created using this method yield airtight fittings that are adjustable in tightness and won't jerk when assembling or disassembling the instrument. The thread is easily made in your home without any special equipment. You will no longer need to seek out a professional repair person for an instrument that has torn cork, loose joints, or joints that are too tight. Let's get to it. So the genesis of this video began several months ago after I had purchased a wonderful Gone reproduction soprano recorder from Jeff Holt. He had graciously invited me over to check out his workshop, and I asked him about this wonderful joint and how he prepared the string for it. He learned this method of thread preparation from Alex Lorenzo, recorder maker and historian who he studied with for a while in New Zealand. As with most thread joints, it involves beeswax. Here's a shot of what Jeff uses. The magic ingredient that he adds to it is Vaseline. The two are melted together in a ratio of 5 parts beeswax to 1 part Vaseline by weight. After that, the thread is plunged into the vat of wax Vaseline mixture and allowed to soak for 20 to 30 minutes until the thread is well saturated. I made up my own custom spools of thread because I like to work with both thick and thin thread. It's okay to start with regular thread. 30 weight is ideal. Jeff recommends either silk or cotton. I went with cotton even though it's not as strong as silk, just because it's cheaper and easier to get by far. He says to stay away from polyesters just because they may stretch, and it seems to me like they wouldn't absorb as well as an organic material. What I did for my custom spools of thread was I purchased some empty spools on Amazon, I'll have links below, and bought some 30 weight cotton thread and some thicker thread and wound them half and half on the spool. Here's a video clip showing how to use the thread to tighten a loose joint on an alto recorder. I use the fine thread for this and just take and wrap it 3 or 4 or 5 times, and then try out the foot joint to see if it's a good fit or not. It's too snug right now. So back it off a couple of winds, try it again. That's about right. Now when you break off the thread, you just smooth it down. It's so saturated with the beeswax Vaseline mixture that it will stay put. And now you see that the joint is hitch-free and it's a good firm joint. So let's wrap a joint. This is a tenor recorder, and we're going to use the thread to wrap this joint. We start with the thick thread, which is always good for at least the first pass. Up in the right-hand corner, you'll notice a picture there. That's a small, like a sample makeup container, and you can buy a bunch of them on Amazon for cheap, because when you finish with your Vaseline wax mixture, when you soak the threads good, you're going to have some left over. So I put it in these small containers, and they're great. You use it like you would cork grease. It's also good to use whenever you need to make a repair or to slightly tighten a joint. That will work also. And these are nice. They have little screw-on lids. And okay, here you see. So I've done the first wrap, and it's still way too loose, but cut it off here and then wrap around. And what I do, since this is the first wrap and it's on bare wood, you're not wrapping over thread, I use a little bit of that leftover wax mixture. And here Jeff has made these wonderful little wood-turned containers that I don't do. Anyway, so just to finish that off, to keep that nice and snug. and then you can go ahead, and this time I'm using the fine thread to continue. I could have done another with thick thread, and now that I think back at it, I probably should have, but I didn't. So here's how I prepared the wax Vaseline mixture. I have an old hot plate, you see it up in the upper right, and I used that, plus I borrowed a saucepan from my wife, and I filled it with about, an inch, 3/4 of an inch of water, brought that to a boil, then put in a wax melting pot that I bought on Amazon for like $13. You don't have to use that, but that's what I used. Oh, now here's something. The thread breaks while winding. Not a big deal, and it probably happened because I think I snagged it while I was wrapping it on the spool. Wasn't being very careful there. You have to do something wrong once to learn, and so I learned. Anyway, I don't think you really have to put the extra wax on there to get it started again, but I did just in case. So we'll continue with the wrapping. It took about 20 minutes in real time. You may have noticed that I've been using large quantities, a pound of beeswax. Certainly, if you're just preparing stuff for yourself, you'll only need about 1/4 of a pound, will be plenty. In fact, that's the ideal amount, that, and you use a small 15-ounce can and use that in your double boiler. So what I did, and what you may consider also, is I made up, almost 30 rolls of this thread using the 2 different sizes, half and half on each roll. Well, I used 50 feet of the thick and 150 feet of the thin, in that you will use a lot of the thin to make any sort of thickness. So I'm figuring and I have been, giving those away to fellow recorder players. If you're at a practice session and somebody's foot joint falls off, or they are trying to put together a bass recorder that they haven't had out of the closet for a couple months or years, there may be difficulties with the joints. With this thread, you can offer an easy temporary fix or sometimes a permanent fix, or you can even show them how to totally replace the joint. If it's a cork joint, replace it with one of these wonderful string joints. So now the joint is done. I've gone around probably 7 times, and I'll tell you, nobody's more surprised than I at how smooth it turns out and what a terrific joint it has become. So I've been doing all my recorders like this. Here's a bass recorder with a composite joint, tech cork they call it. It's pieces of cork glued together. Not my favorite, and you can see it's kind of jerky. It's not a very smooth joint. So I bit the bullet, got out my razor blade, took it off, and replaced it with string. I went around with the thick thread 3 times on this, and about 3 times with the thin. And once again, turned out a wonderful joint, very smooth as you can see. I'd like to thank Jeff Holt for sharing Alex Loretto's formula for making wax impregnated thread for woodwind joints. Here are some weight conversions to help you make the wax Vaseline mixture. First, I would recommend that you do all your calculations in grams rather than pounds. It's a whole lot easier working with big numbers. If you're using 1/4 pound of beeswax, that means you're going to need around 22 grams of Vaseline, because 4 ounces of beeswax, which is 1/4 pound, is 112 grams. Divide by 5 and you get 22. The weight of Vaseline is 6 grams per teaspoon, so 22 grams would be about 3½ teaspoons. A tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, so you would use 1 tablespoon and 1/2 teaspoon for 1/4 pound of beeswax. That's it for this time. I appreciate your watching this video and hope that you will become a a thread person, as I have, coming to the rescue of many rehearsals. You know, it's just great. Have a whole bunch of this made up. If you're a recorder player and involved in a recorder society, you could, maybe even give a little presentation. Certainly you'll be able to make a lot of friends among your other consort members. If you're in a recorder orchestra, heck, if you speak at a workshop, you could show this, demonstrate it. To my way of thinking, it's a perfect solution for any joint ills. Anyway, take care, and we'll see you next time.